If you work in tech and you spend some time writing code, whether you're a developer or software tester, then chances are you've heard of the terms Git and GitHub. Mastering Git is a very common skill that I encourage everyone to learn, especially to software testers who wants to learn how to write test automation code. Git can be quite confusing to learn, especially when you have to deal with the large code base and code conflicts. So in this video, I'll go over the basics of Git, common terms that you'll hear when you first work with Git, and a look at what the typical Git workflow looks like. So, what is Git? Git in a nutshell is basically a version control system for code. Remember when you were working with projects and you've saved multiple copies of it to version it correctly? I know I've done this before. It's probably worked fine in cases where you have single files or you weren't collaborating with other people. But what happens when you start working with other people and you need to make sure that what you're changing doesn't make an impact to what they are doing? What if you want to make sure that any changes you make doesn't get lost along the way? What if you want to restore to a previous version easily? This is where Git can help you. A perfect comparison that I can think of is with Google Docs. With Google Docs, you can track all the changes that someone has done over time to your Word document, and you can also restore back to previous versions. You can do the same thing with Git, basically. This all sounds great, but why do I need to learn Git if I am a software tester? First of all, it's an essential skill to have if you want to learn test automation. It also encourages better collaboration with the team, and changes that can impact a certain feature can be tracked and versioned easily. Let's jump onto some terminologies. When getting started with Git, the first thing that you'll probably hear is a term called repository. A repository, or repo for short, is basically a folder or a place where all files are stored. When you initialize Git into your project locally, a new folder called .git gets created. .git will then track your changes over time, so any new images added to the images folder or changes made to any of these files will now be tracked. Speaking of repos, this is where GitHub comes into play. GitHub isn't the same as Git. GitHub is an online service for hosting your repos. You can upload your repo to GitHub or clone an existing repo from other people, so you can also make changes to it. Once you have a repo initialized or cloned, the next term that you need to be familiar of is Git branches. The best way to explain branches is to use the tree analogy. Think of the main branch of your repo as the central trunk of your tree. When you want to introduce a new automated test or even a bug fix, you branch off the central trunk. A branch is not part of the trunk, but it's connected to it. Similar with Git, a branch is an extension of the main branch. You can have as many branches as you want, and a branch could even be extended from another branch. Working with branches allows you to make changes safely without introducing impact to other people working on the same code base. Now that you have a basic understanding of what branches are in Git, the next common term that you'll hear is called Git commits. A commit in Git basically represents a snapshot of your repo in a given timestamp. When you want to tell Git that your changes are ready, you commit it to your repo and it's added as part of your repo's history. Combining it with branches, you can then create commits into your specific branch and merge that branch back at the main branch. Before you commit your changes, Git has a concept called a staging area that allows you to decide when the changes you make are ready to be committed. Say for example, you've edited 3 unique files, index.html, testdata.js, and test.js. Let's say that you want to group your commits so that changes to index.html are done on a single commit, while the changes to the 2 JS files are done separately. Staging allows you to customize your commits easily. Now that you have some familiarity with some of the basic Git terms, let's have a look at a very common Git workflow. A typical Git workflow locally includes the following. You initialize a repo or clone an existing one, you create a new branch and work on specific code changes, you stage your changes ready to be committed, and then you commit the changes so Git can have a snapshot of it. Now, let's dive into some Git demonstration. Don't worry too much yet on the Git commands that I'll be using, as I'll be covering that on a separate video. For now, I just want you to understand how Git comes into picture when you're making some changes to a working project. To start, I am in a folder called Git Tutorial, which will contain a sample text file. This sample text file just contains some dummy text, which I have saved. In real projects, you'll be cloning an existing one, but for this tutorial, I'll be initializing Git locally by running Git init. Notice that by default, I'm now in a branch called master, and an empty Git repo has been created in the .git folder. Let's commit this initial file by adding it to our staging area and adding a relevant commit message. Once this has been committed, Git now has a snapshot of this change. We can have a look at the Git log file where you can see information about the commit, such as the commit author, the timestamp, as well as the commit hash number, which is a unique number per each commit. Now, just imagine that new people will now work as part of this project. You want to make some new changes, but you don't want to commit it straight to the main branch. So, let's go ahead and switch to a new branch. Let's go ahead and make some changes to the existing file that we already have previously. Once we've saved our changes, we can run git status to check the status of our commits. You can see here that the existing file that we have updated has a status called modified. Once we're happy, we can add that again to the staging area and then commit the changes again. Now you should see that your branch has 2 commits. However, if you go back to the main branch or the master branch, you still only have the initial change since your new branch hasn't been merged to the main branch. And there you have it. In this video, I explained basic concepts about Git, some common terms that you might encounter, and an example Git workflow that you can do locally. For my next video, we'll explore the 10 most useful Git commands that you can use right away, especially if you're just starting out with Git. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy content like this.